Hey, I guess winning might actually be contagious. Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, our Sixers writer from NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, extraordinaire, as well as Ben Barry, waiting in the wings, our producer. And Noah, Vince Lombardi said it best: winning isn't everything; it's the only thing. And what a way to bounce back from that drubbing in New York. The Sixers roll off 3 straight wins. They do it in a variety of ways. And I guess a little home cooking always does you well as the Sixers get a W. We're coming to you here after the Portland Trailblazers victory. Plenty of games this week. The Sixers, finishing up the homestand. I think the only days they don't play are today, Tuesday, and Saturday, I believe. But I could be wrong. But Noah, a lot to talk about. But I think the topics start with Joel Embiid, I would guess, and Ben Simmons. I guess we start with the cornerstones and then work our way down. But Joel Embiid sat out this last game, Noah, because of a scheduled off day. As I mentioned, a lot of games, back-to-backs here for the 76ers as well. It was a scheduled off day. He had an MRI on his knee. Everything came back clean, which is great news for Sixers fans. Ben Simmons still not with the team because of personal reasons, and he has worked with the team at shoot around, I believe, Noah, but nothing more than that. Can you tell us what you know about Joel, your perspective on Ben, and how that sits with you?
Yeah, Joel Embiid, obviously we all knew he wasn't going to play all 82, although he has stated his desire to set a new career best this season for regular season games played. But it was very funny because the way Doc Rivers framed it to us, like they knew this going in for a long time and this was all pre-planned. And then Andre Drummond says after the game that he found out he was starting on Twitter. So I think he was serious. I don't think he was cracking a joke. So Drummond was oblivious to those plans, but regardless, played extremely well, I think, in his first start as a Sixer and filled that Joel Embiid spot quite nicely. As far as Ben Simmons, yeah, things I think continue to remain murky, no firm timeline. I guess it's accurate to say he's not with the team and that he's not participating in practices, but going back for at least 4 or 5 days now, I believe, if not a little longer, he's been at the practice facility in Camden. He's been putting up shots. Doc Rivers mentioned a couple days ago he was doing so with Rivers' son, Spencer Rivers, who's one of the Sixer skill development coaches. And Rivers even said yesterday that Simmons was doing a lot of shooting, and it was the most he's seen him working by far. So, again, the details here are sparse, but everything continues to indicate that the Sixers see Simmons as making some sort of progress to the idea that maybe he could potentially play again, and maybe that doesn't even happen that far down the line. But it's still tough to know exactly what's going on there. And then the Sixers ended this game without Danny Green, who suffered a left hamstring injury that Doc Rivers said he does have some concern about. And they started the game without Tobias Harris, who was a late scratch due to health and safety protocols. And we're still waiting for a little clarity there on exactly how long he might be out for. So quite a few big name absences, but as I'm sure we'll get into, the guys who filled those roles did really well. And the Sixers did not miss their stars to the extent that you figured they might on Monday night.
Yeah. Give credit to the others, as Shaquille O'Neal likes to put it, the Sixers second unit, as well as the guys filling in the starting lineup. You mentioned Tobias Harris not playing last night. We still, like you said, don't know when he'll be cleared or eligible to come back. If he personally has contracted the coronavirus or was around someone who does have it. But that was the funny thing is, probably 30 to 40 minutes before tip-off that we found that out. And he was on the court warming up before the game. And, we're into this world of contact tracing and, who he interacted with and whatnot. So definitely, I don't know if scary is the word, but concerning, considering how contagious this virus is. But we will await to hear word on just the clarity on that, like you mentioned, Noah. But here we are, the Sixers thrown into the fire with as almost as last minute scratch as you can make for a guy who was considered healthy leading up to tip off until that time Tobias had to be pulled off the court. But Furkan Korkmaz steps into the starting lineup, Andre Drummond as well. Now, can we, a few places to start here, but the versatility of Furkan Korkmaz kind of stands out if you're asking this guy to play point guard in the second unit, and then maybe fill in at the 4 for Tobias Harris. This guy has really grown over the years. His defense has stepped up. I mean, he obviously, as many players do, have growing pains here as they progress and grow. But the versatility of Furkan Korkmaz helped the Sixers get that win against Portland, as well as the other guys in the second unit who stepped in and filled in admirably.
Yeah, it wasn't. Korkmaz did well. It wasn't his best game ever. Did knock down 2 important threes in the fourth to kind of seal the deal, and he's made a habit of that early in the season. Of games that the Sixers are probably going to win, he completely ices it with his shot making. So credit to him, and obviously it's not new. He was a spot starter last postseason when Danny Green went down with an injury, but. To me, the story of last night, more than Korkmaz, is the offseason additions, George Niang and Andre Drummond. George Niang had a special night despite not shooting the ball well in the first half. Continued to trust in his jumper and just has made a lot of delightful plays where he has this minivan nickname and he kind of rumbles down the court, but this is a guy who can handle the ball, run dribble handoffs, pick and pops, is a sharp passer. Doc Rivers even admitted he didn't realize Niang was this skilled as a passer and as a driver. And in the second half of this game, George Niang is getting MVP chance, which I don't think anyone foresaw. And at one point, he was leading the Sixers in scoring. So I just thought it was a remarkable night from Niang, and I think it's cool from a human perspective to see this guy who is all about knowing his limitations and being aware of what he does well. Get to expand his game a little here and do more than he's ever been asked to in the NBA. And thus far, he's really taken to it quite well, I thought. And then, of course, Andre Drummond. This is nothing new for him either, starting. I mean, it was his 595th career start, first as a Sixer, and gets 14 points, 15 rebounds, 7 assists, no turnovers, and 5 steals. So very eye-catching stats from Drummond, even if he claims he was oblivious to this plan to start him in this game.
Yeah, Niang, a guy that Doc Rivers admitted after the game, they had their eye on from midway last season as a guy they might want to acquire. They finally land him, here in the offseason. And yes, I was definitely burying the lead, trying to parse through everything else to get to George Niang. But yeah, man, a guy who isn't, as shifty as some of the more modern NBA players are, a guy who's not a high flyer like some of these modern NBA players are, but this has a way of getting downhill, getting in the creases, and being able to put the ball on the floor, which you might not expect from a shooter, and able to shoot his way out of maybe a bad start as well. And he says after the game he didn't want to let the Philly sports fans down. So I mean, a guy, you're talking about people getting it and understanding what it's like to play here. Niang fitting in well. We had talked about him playing some 5. We had talked about, where he would fit in that second unit and whatnot. But it just seems to be, he's ready for any assignment because he fills in last night and, like you said, leads the team in scoring, produces when the team needs it, and was able to help hold off Portland when they made a bit of a run there. Doc Rivers was surprised by some of his skills. I was surprised, by some of the things he was able to do. But it just goes to show some confidence, and some opportunity. And all of a sudden, he's contributing and helping this team roll off 3 straight W's.
Yeah, we don't want to overlook Seth Curry. I believe he actually finished the night with 23, leading the Sixers on scoring. But Niang at one point, and I was thinking, like, when's the last time this happened? I think he might have done it once or twice in Utah, but he certainly has not been regularly among his team scoring leaders since his college days at Iowa State. But yeah, the versatility from both Niang and Drummond has stood out to me. I think from Drummond, sure, he's not going to impress you at the shooting range or be able to do a ton as far as creating for himself offensively. But boy, you saw last night the value of this being a guy who can hedge screens and recover and who can create fast breaks by, poking free steals on the perimeter and who can be a really imposing force, on the glass, which the Sixers needed, given they've been rebounding pretty poorly outside of Drummond. So I've personally been impressed by all that from him. And then George Niang, of course, multi-positional and just multi-skilled and just plays smart, sensible basketball across the board, which is always nice to have on your team. I think, the shooting obviously is the standout skill, but he does a lot more than that. And it's been cool to see him get to embrace those skills a little bit more under Doc Rivers. So very cool to see.
Yeah, Seth Curry, 3 for 10 from behind the arc, definitely below his season average. But once again, the team puts up 36 3-pointers, where they're continuing to make this effort on getting up 3-point shots. And if I'm not mistaken, they lead the league in field goal percentage currently and are very near the upper echelon in other offensive categories, where last season that wasn't the case when the season ended. We'll see how things transpire here. But when you look at the way Tyrese Maxey has fit into the starting lineup, does that give you more optimism or notice his flaws more? Because, especially at certain times, players getting more time maybe exacerbates some of their deficiencies rather than shows the things that they can do, like with George Niang and his opportunity. But how are you feeling about Tyrese Maxey here through these first few games?
I think it's been largely positive. I think there have been, 1 or 2 tough moments, but they've put so much on his plate. I mean, you look at the last 2 games, he's guarding Trae Young and Damian Lillard, and I think defensively we're continuing to see him trend up in a really encouraging way. I think, honestly, last year he was a little behind where I expected defensively, just because based on the stuff I saw in college, you saw a lot of tools there that you thought would translate, like clearly a very competitive kid who's got good instincts and likes fighting over screens, but just it was such a whirlwind for him early on that some of the nuances of the game and how to actually get over screens effectively and to get those rear view contests seemed to just not come as easily to him as the offensive side of the game. But thought he did a really nice job on Damian Lillard, albeit Lillard is off to a very cold shooting start. And I think the Sixers were fortunate that remained the case. But yeah, Maxey, I think we all knew that he wasn't going to directly replace an all-star or be a Ben Simmons-like player. But I think you have to like a lot of what you've seen. I think it will be interesting if he remains in that starting lineup moving forward. Rivers mentioned, I guess it was before the Hawks game, that he was seriously considering Shake Milton as a starter, but then was informed Milton's on a minutes limit coming back from this right ankle sprain, and therefore that just wasn't on the table in his mind. But yeah, I think for the most part, you have to like what you've seen from Maxey. Obviously a kid who enjoys learning, enjoys getting better. And through 7 games, you're already seeing, I think, some positive strides with how he's done.
Yeah, I was really encouraged by the way he played against the Atlanta Hawks, which was a much easier game than I anticipated. But and Doc Rivers accentuating after the game that, there really no nights off when you're a starting point guard in the NBA. You mentioned Trae Young. You mentioned Portland, the Chicago Bulls. We'll get into that in a minute. But when you see the consistency of his play and the way he's kind of stepping into these roles, and obviously mistakes are going to happen, but I'm really encouraged by the way he's gritting his teeth and kind of standing in the fire and dealing with, what's in front of him. I think it's clear that the Sixers need more there from the point guard position, but as it stands right now, you can't be upset with the winning that they've been able to do, particularly some close games they could have had. But in the end, here we are with this 3 straight victories, and they hope to finish the homestand against the Chicago Bulls on a high note. We'll get into that in a second, but let's take a quick timeout and come back and talk about this next game in the homestand. Ready to make a move? A Wilmington University education can take you where you want to go. WilmU works online or in person. Learn more at wilmu.edu. Yeah, man. The Chicago Bulls 6-1. They've made some offseason moves that have bolstered the rotation. You look at Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan coming in here to really continue their push and establish themselves, the Bulls that is at the top of the Eastern Conference. A great test for the Sixers in this last game of the homestand coming up here on Wednesday. Noah, do you think the Sixers, obviously Joel Embiid will be back? I was, thought that they should have sat him at the Pistons game to get him 3 days off in between, the Hawks and the Knicks, but he still gets his 3 days here. So shows how much I know, but he comes to this Bull game. Joel Embiid will be back. What are you anticipating from this Bulls game with a team that has played really well? They lost their only loss being a tough loss to the Knicks. I believe that was a 1-point loss. So this could be an undefeated team at this point if things fall their way. But are the Sixers in the same caliber as the Bulls, do you think, at this point?
Yeah, really hard to judge early in the season. I think most likely, yeah. We don't know yet Tobias Harris's status or Danny Green's status. I mean, based on the way hamstring injuries tend to linger and the fact that Danny Green is the oldest Sixer and it's early in the season, I'd probably be surprised if he plays at this point.
So Doc saying he wanted to come out of the game, which was surprising to him.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like a great sign. So for me personally, especially in the context of you figure Green probably doesn't start, I'm really excited to see Matisse Thybulle versus Zach LaVine, because one of the things one of the kind of light bulb moments for me last year where you realized Thybulle had made this progress beyond just the highlight blocks and steals and was becoming so much better as like a solid on-ball defender was when he got to go up against Zach LaVine, who's obviously an all-star level player and one of the league's better scorers. So for me, that's personally a matchup that stands out. And then obviously Joel Embiid last year scored a career high 50 points. That's the last time he played the Chicago Bulls at Wells Fargo Center. There will be 20,000 fans in attendance for this one, as opposed to 0. So I'm excited to see how he fares there, what the Bulls do defensively, whether they double team him more aggressively, try to force the balls out of his hands. You figured that would be a logical strategy. But it's a good early season test for the Sixers, albeit one where, again, they're probably going to be shorthanded. So therefore, you don't learn anything extremely profound. But boy, if you can pick up another win against the Bulls, make it 4 straight wins, continuing to kind of build this identity of we're a team that shares the ball and can win regardless of who's out there. That would be a big one for the Sixers for sure. And then they've got Detroit in the second night of that back-to-back, which, as we've seen, that team, even on the second night of a back-to-back, looks awfully beatable, although they've got Cade Cunningham in the mix for them now. So that will be another matchup to look forward to.
Yeah, the home has been a fortress for the Sixers over the past couple of years. So for them to take care of the Bulls, like you mentioned, being shorthanded will be definitely interesting. Chicago, if you didn't see, coming off hanging 128 on the Boston Celtics. And, a team coming in with that type of firepower will be an interesting matchup for the 76ers, but I'm sure the fans will be behind them and supporting as they always do. Do you think that when you look at Chicago, and them being an aspiring playoff team and a team that's trying to – Sixers obviously the number one seed last year. Do you feel like the Sixers look at this as a test as much as maybe Chicago will look to, continue their winning ways? Because if you're shorthanded and you don't have your full firepower, it could be an opportunity for you to maybe have a built-in excuse for maybe not being up to snuff against the Bulls coming in here at 6-1.
Yeah, my sense is these early season games just in general are likely viewed as more important to a team like the Bulls than a squad like the Sixers, where we're all just looking ahead months down the line of what is this team going to look like when the playoffs arrive. So the Bulls, a lot of this early success is understandably exciting. They started 4-0 since the first time since the Michael Jordan era. The new additions have looked good, and it's definitely, I think, fun for Bulls fans to see how they fare against some of the teams that figure to be in the Eastern Conference playoff mix. For the Sixers, not to say that this isn't fun or shouldn't be fun, but look, there are kind of bigger picture matters, I think, inevitably at mind, and that's just realistically going to be the case until or unless this team gets over this hump that has been bothering them for a while in the second round of the playoffs. But that said, like nights like last night, I think are one of the reasons, one of the good points of evidence for tuning in to regular season games, because you get to see stuff you don't expect, like George Niang scoring over 20 points and Andre Drummond throwing it back to the Pistons days, and those kind of accomplishments that you just don't think you're going to see when you turn on the TV that night.
How about 20 assists? Didn't expect to see that in the first half, as the Sixers are continuing to show they're a team that can share the basketball and can shoot the basketball, and things that we haven't seen from this team in years past, particularly at this clip. And I look at that as a giant feather in their cap heading into this matchup with the Bulls, because them continuing to share the ball is what's getting them the open looks, is what's getting them the opportunities to keep it building those margins when the game gets close, being unselfish and getting open shots, particularly for the, Niang and, Danny Green not being there. Hopefully, Furkan Korkmaz, if he steps into the starting lineup again, Doc Rivers has shown he's willing to juggle that starting lineup however he sees fit, depending on the matchup. So I'm encouraged by that. Noah, you always have great articles on the website. You have your 3 observations up there last night from the game against Portland. What are you working on right now? No practice today, but heading into this game against the Bulls.
Yeah, so I had a story this morning, just kind of summing up Drummond's night, and his first start as a Sixer, a surprise start, but a very successful one, and just taking a look at what he's brought to the team in the early going. As far as today, we'll be on top of any updates we might receive on Tobias Harris. Well down the line, hoping to have some sort of Tyrese Maxey film review and choose through some of the film to give some analysis on what we've seen from him. But yeah, then tomorrow morning we'll start looking ahead to Chicago, and excited for that one.
Yeah, fantastic stat stuffing night. 7 assists, 5 steals, I believe it was, for Andre Drummond to go with those rebounds and points. We'll look for that type of performance against the Bulls, and hopefully the Sixers can get their 4th straight win. Hey, we appreciate you listening to Sixers Talk, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU works. For Noah Levick and Ben Berry, I'm Danny Pommells. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.